when you win Iowa and you win New Hampshire, they've never had a loss. There's never been. So we're not going to be the first, I can tell you.
Former President Trump tightens his grip on the Republican presidential nomination. A solid victory in New Hampshire's primary bolsters the likelihood of a rematch against President Biden later this year. But Mr. Trump's GOP rival is making it clear she is far from throwing in the towel.
At one point in this campaign, there were 14 of us running, and we were at 2% in the polls. Well, I'm a fighter. And I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump.
Hello, I'm Mike Emanuel. Jillian, great to be working with you.
Good to be with you tonight, Mike. I'm Jillian Turner in Washington. We got continuing special coverage for you, the first in the nation presidential primary. Nikki Haley, Donald Trump duked it out in the days leading up to Monday's showdown. But in the end, you might have noticed, it was not even close. Despite putting a lot of time and money on the line in New Hampshire, the former UN ambassador did not crack Donald Trump's command of the Republican Party.
Mr. Trump can now boast of being the first Republican presidential candidate to win open races in Iowa and New Hampshire since 1976. By posting easy wins in both early states, Trump is demonstrating his ability to unite the GOP's factions firmly behind him. All this despite battling a litany of criminal and civil accusations.
The focus now shifts to next month's primary in Haley's home state, South Carolina. As her path to the Republican nomination is narrowing, Haley's campaign is insisting a strong showing there could propel her into Super Tuesday, March 5th. But in a deeply conservative state where Trump is exceedingly popular, Haley's ambitions may be tough to realize. In a home state, loss is certain to end her 2024 quest to become America's first woman president. Take a listen.
Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation.
For more on former President Trump's primary win in the Granite State, we now go to Fox News correspondent Alexis McAdams, who's standing by live in New Hampshire. Alexis, how are you? What was it like at the Trump headquarters?
Hi, well, I was going to say good afternoon because I guess I don't know what time it is because we've been with the Trump campaign out there on the ground right throughout the morning, the afternoon, and now into the night, kind of checking in with the former president to get a pulse on how he was feeling throughout the day. Had to tell you, he kind of felt like, at least recently, he's had it in the bag here in the Granite State, and that ended up being the case. The former president coming out on top here. Nikki Haley, though, saying she's not running for second place. She's not going to give up. And they've been exchanging a lot of attacks here, and it happened again tonight. Watch this.
We are going to win this. We have no choice. If we don't win, I think our country is finished. I do. I believe our country is finished. We have an opportunity to do something so amazing.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina.
So that was just some of the action on those stages, right, at those dueling rallies and at those campaign events tonight. Nikki Haley is not giving up, but when we talk with voters here, they believe that Donald Trump kind of identifies more with what they care about here in the Granite State. Mike?
Alexis, what was the top issue for voters there in New Hampshire?
Well, when we talk to people on the ground, they continue to bring up immigration as their top issue. And then when you check out, Mike, that Fox News voter analysis that just came in the past few hours, that's what ended up happening here in those polls and those questions, too, from the data. And that's what we saw, too, in Iowa. And it's interesting, right, because here we talk all the time, rather, about the southern border, what's going on in Eagle Pass, Texas, and people see that on their TV screens. And then they see these migrants showing up in these big cities pretty much everywhere across the country. So now it's impacting people. And also here in New Hampshire, Mike, they really care about the border because they're talking about the fentanyl issue and all the overdoses they have, and also say they have a lot of issues at the northern border, which they think kind of gets ignored. So watch this.
The main issues are definitely closing the border up to keep the United States of America safe.
I don't think she's strong enough on the border, for one. I don't think she's good for the economy, for another. But
So that's just some of the things that we've been hearing from voters on the ground. But it is interesting, kind of no matter where you are, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, New York, Chicago, right? People are talking about the migrant crisis and what's going on with immigration.
Alexis, he had a lot of supporters there and former rivals. Some interesting people watching what was going on stage there with the former president.
Well, actually, one of the interesting people we saw walk in the room there tonight, Mike, was George Santos. So he wanted to come. He said it was an open event, and he wanted to watch the former president up on that stage. We also saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, Carrie Lake, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Senator Tim Scott. And these are all people, some of them, right, who've been floated as possible cabinet choice for the former president or even a VP pick. And that's how confident Trump is here. He's talking about vice presidential picks already. I was able to talk with Vivek Ramaswamy and Senator Tim Scott if they'd be interested in that. Watch this.
Would you want to be his vice president?
So look, I'm going to do whatever's right for the country, and in the next step, as long as I'm able to be helpful in this campaign, I will be.
So is it going to be Vice President Tim Scott?
It's going to be Tim Scott working on behalf of the American people. That means getting Donald Trump to be the next president. Don't think about myself. Don't think about the individuals. Let's think about America first.
I thought I'd be able to get it out of them, right? I thought if they tell anybody here, it'd be me. But they didn't let it slip out if they would be interested in being a vice president. But they really had a lot of supporters cheering them on, too, when they came in the room. People were excited, the younger voters there, to see Vivek Ramaswamy and Senator Tim Scott. So we'll have to see kind of if they continue out of the campaign trail, which they say they will, if that's going to pull in more support for Donald Trump, Mike.
Perhaps a little auditioning going on there. Alexis McAdams live in Bedford. Right. Alexis, many thanks. Julian?
All right, thank you, Mike. President Biden's projected to win the Democratic primary in New Hampshire by a long shot. His supporters had to write his name in. He was not on the state ballot because of the ongoing dispute between his campaign and the DNC over the primary calendar. The Biden team's been arguing for a year now the state is not diverse enough to vote first. His victory overnight is symbolic. There are no delegates on the line in New Hampshire.
The race for the White House took a sharp turn last weekend when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspended his campaign. He made the announcement in a video posted on social media Sunday. In it, he thanked his supporters and endorsed former President Trump. How times have changed. This leaves former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley as the lone Trump alternative in the GOP race, but without much time to catch up to the frontrunner. She's trailing Mr. Trump with about 10 to 11 points in New Hampshire. So where did Ron DeSantis voters turn? Let's welcome our panel to tackle this. Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell, Fox News contributor and Progressive Radio host Leslie Marshall, and Lauren Wright, associate research scholar and lecturer in politics and public affairs at Princeton. Welcome to all three of you.
Good morning.
So, Lauren, let's start with you. What are your key takeaways from New Hampshire?
Well, look, what we saw unfold, it's yesterday now, but really the polling bared out. What we saw in the last few days before DeSantis dropped out and after was pretty much this 10-point spread that we expected for Trump. And so it does give me some confidence that voters are doing what they say they're going to do headed into the ballot box. And as far as your question about DeSantis, there's a lot more overlap between DeSantis supporters and Trump supporters than there is between DeSantis supporters and Haley supporters. So yes, there's this question of people who wanted a Trump alternative, but it's also about conservatism. It's also about COVID lockdown policy. A lot of those people probably went to Trump tonight, Mike.
So let's pick up there, Gianno, to Lauren's point. Is that still the case? Is there still an argument to be made for there is a significant part of the Republican base that is yearning for a Trump alternative?
Well, I got to tell you, I believe this race is over. I think tonight solidifies that, what we've seen in New Hampshire. I don't believe there to be a MAGA base, or rather a Trump base. I think it's the Republican base that really wants Donald Trump to be the leader and the Republican nominee. And I think that's been clear. We've seen it poll after poll, and we've now seen two races where people resoundingly want Donald Trump as president. And when we look at the exit polling in New Hampshire, 42% consider immigration to be their most favorite issue. This is what people want to see get done. They want to see the border closed. And I think that's going to be a really important issue in the general election, especially in urban centers like Chicago, Los Angeles, where you have a lot of African Americans who are saying that they're not going to vote for Democrats because of the migrant issue. So I think we're looking into the general election. Joe Biden made that clear as well tonight with his statement saying that he's the clear nominee. And I think the Republicans need to coalesce around Donald Trump at this time.
Leslie, let's pick up on that point that Gianno just made. I'm struck by people saying the race is over. I mean, Iowa, New Hampshire, that's a small fraction of the American people who have voted. It strikes me that there have been candidates who stayed in for a few months, let a bunch of states vote, and then maybe they drop out. Your thoughts? Is the race over?
Well, you could say it is, because when there's a race between two people and you come in second, you lost. And you can say second. Some people may say, well, she's within striking distance because you're talking about that 10%. But she needed 10% or less to even stay in this. But to your point, Mike, you know, March 5th is Super Tuesday. And even though right now, when I'm looking ahead at Nevada, that has their caucus and their primary at the same time, it's kind of confusing. Trump's going to win that. South Carolina, he's got a 36%, depending on which poll or, you know, which average of polls that you believe, lead on her in her home state. So it does, maybe the fat lady isn't singing, but she's walking up on stage with the microphone. And even the Biden campaign, you know, pretty much looks at this as a race between Joe Biden and a rematch against Donald Trump, who many believe, both on the Republican and the Democratic side, not only will be, but already is the Republican nominee. So miracles can happen. There are Hail Marys. But I'm a pessimist, so I'm sorry. I'm not as enthusiastic about Nikki Haley as Nikki Haley is.
Well, but President Biden's campaign was essentially dead until South Carolina. So calls for her to get out now seem premature, no?
If I were to respond to that, I would say
she's not going to.
No.
I didn't know who she was asking, so.
Yeah, I didn't know either. That's why I was going to jump in. But I wouldn't say that it's premature at all. I wouldn't say that it's premature at all, considering the fact that it is a two-person race. And when we're talking about Joe Biden, there was multiple candidates in that particular primary. So given the fact that so many of other candidates have dropped out of the race, I think this is clear that this is a two-person race, and the second person, Nikki Haley, has lost each race. And I know that a lot of her donors, some have said, even on our network yesterday, that if Haley didn't outright win this primary contest, that they were going to stop supporting her and they were going to put their dollars behind Donald Trump. And I think you're going to see a coalescing of donors around Donald Trump. There's people who clearly may not like his personality or some of the things he said, but they love his policies. Therefore, they're going to get behind the one person who they believe can win win his nominee and, of course, hopefully win the general election.
All right. Gianno, Leslie, Lauren, we understand you're going to be generous with your time, so we'll see you in a bit.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon.
Well, former President Trump and Nikki Haley definitely don't see eye to eye on the top national security issues facing the country. Trump claims that Haley was a mediocre UN ambassador. She's now accusing him of being weak on China. Fox News correspondent Benjamin Hall takes a look at what sets them apart from London.
Well, the focus may very well be on domestic issues at the moment, but the two candidates also have far different foreign policies as well. President Trump has always been an American-first president, and he has accused Nikki Haley of being more global. One difference is Ukraine. President Trump has said that defending Ukraine is not a national security priority for America, and he says he would get a peace deal in just one day and that the unlimited money there must stop. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, believes that everything must be given to Ukraine to try and push back Russia, and not doing so would allow Russia to run rampant through Europe. Nikki Haley has also taken off the gloves now and accused Trump of also cozying up to dictators. Just yesterday, she released a campaign ad with the mother of Otto Warmbier. He was the student who was arrested and killed by North Korea, who said Haley was there for her during that ordeal. Nikki Haley has also mocked Trump's bromance with Putin. President Trump, however, defends all his meetings with these leaders, believing that any dialogue can be useful, and that you must sit and talk to everyone and try to work on a deal, just in the way he did with Presidents Putin, Kim Jong-un and Xi. Both candidates also agree on countering China. However, Nikki Haley has criticized Trump again for being far too friendly with the country, saying that President Trump is only focused on economic restrictions, while she would be far more active in the region alongside Asian allies. As for Israel, both Haley and Trump have total support for the country and what's happening in Gaza, but President Trump has already warned against getting further involved in the Middle East and is also calling Haley a warmonger. One other key focus is the US relationship with NATO. President Trump has made it very clear that he will reevaluate that relationship. Unless other countries continue to increase their own spending, there are rumours that President Trump could pull out altogether. That would be a geopolitical lightning strike, and other countries are already looking to see how they would respond if that happened. Nikki Haley has a far more traditional view of the relationship and believes in keeping it much as it is. Mike, Gillian?
All right, Benjamin Hall in London for us tonight. Thank you.
With about 10% setting them apart in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley vows to fight on in South Carolina, but former President Trump has secured big-name endorsements in her home state. Will it hurt her chances? More on that next.
Every time I've run for office in South Carolina, I've beaten the political establishment. They're lined up against me again. That's no surprise. But South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election.
What we see right now with her continuing in this race is the ugly underbelly of American politics, where the mega donors are trying to do one thing when we, the people, say another.
I don't want all the political establishment endorsements that everybody's talking about.
Well, Nikki Haley shrugging off the lack of support her campaign's receiving from the political establishment here in Washington. It was a tough night for Haley in New Hampshire. She finished more than 10 points behind Trump in the nation's first primary. Now she's vowing to stay in the race no matter what as she prepares for her next stop, her home state of South Carolina. Haley says she's not worried about scoring endorsements from that state's lawmakers. Joining us here on set is Samantha Jo Roth from the Washington Examiner. Samantha, I know that you've been talking to the Haley campaign tonight. How are they really feeling behind the scenes? Are they as, determined as they are publicly?
Yeah, I think I would say that they are, or at least that's what they're letting on at this hour. I was receiving some texts from Haley World, during Trump's speech, all of them kind of being like, wow, he's talking about her. He must be threatened by her. They're really trying to spin that narrative, and they're trying to talk about that, she's moving forward, that she's going to go to South Carolina, that they want to stay through Super Tuesday. She has fundraising, on the calendar, that she's supposed to be going to New York and Florida and all of these places. So the big question now is, are these donors willing to spend millions of dollars to support someone who still has not won one state? And, they're going to have to take a hard look over the next couple of days and see whether they're going to really want to chart a path forward.
Right. I was struck by the former president seemed pretty grumpy about her.
Well, I think he was mad. I think a lot of people were watching her speech tonight, watching her thank her family and kind of being like, all right, is this when she's going to drop out? And this is sort of a similar speech as to what she gave in Iowa, where she did something really similar. But I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, maybe this is the moment. And I think that's apparently what former President Trump really wanted to see.
Right.
And unfortunately for him, it was not, and this is still a race. But, it is notable that, President Biden sees this now as just a race between him and Trump. I think Democrats want to see it that way so they can start moving forward to the general election. But you still do have the former South Carolina governor who is in the race. So, we'll have to see what happens with that. But I think a lot of people really are trying to take a look at this, and they see how difficult it's going to be for her to move forward.
So the Haley campaign told our team on the ground last night there are now 2 states, as you said, where Trump got barely half the vote. That's incredibly weak for an incumbent. Everyone said he was going to win by 20 points, and that didn't happen. If her campaign is looking ahead to 2028 now and really focusing on her prospects there after this cycle, when is the optimal moment for them to pull out? Is it before or after South Carolina?
That's a really hard question to ask. I mean, I think some experts would tell you it would be before she hits her state of South Carolina. That's going to be a hard pill for her to swallow. We're looking at the polling. She is behind significantly, and that's embarrassing. That's her home state. She
I
said
think almost 30 points, right? At least according to Real Clear Politics.
Yeah, exactly. And she keeps saying, I want to go home to sweet, South Carolina. Well, it's not looking so sweet for her at this point. But she's going to have to take a hard look and decide what her path is forward. There still are, if you're looking at the numbers, there are still a lot of very unhappy Republicans. They're not happy with former President Trump. And he has a vulnerability, what we're seeing with these independents and, with some of these voters who do not support him. So it doesn't appear like his campaign is looking to court these voters at this time. Whether they will turn that way is an open question. It seems like he's kind of going to continue the scorched earth campaign against Nikki Haley, whereas I think some of his advisors and experts would like him to just turn to Biden and completely ignore her. But we'll see how that works out.
Well, thank you for staying up so late with us. We really appreciate it. Great chatting with you.
Great to see you.
So nice to see you.
Thanks.
President Trump and his supporters celebrating their latest win in New Hampshire, but Nikki Haley making it very clear she's still in this primary race. But can former president be stopped? More on that ahead.
But I'm going to invite you to my home state starting tomorrow, where this election is over. It is time for the Republican Party to coalesce around our nominee and the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. Let's get that party started tonight.
Former President Trump scores another big political victory, this time in New Hampshire. It was the nation's first presidential primary of 2024, and the former president demonstrated once again his command over the Republican Party.
This is a great, great state. We won New Hampshire 3 times now. 3. We win it every time.
Mr. Trump's rock-solid support among New Hampshire Republicans Monday and in Iowa last week heightens the chances of a Trump-Biden 2.0 rematch later this year. Even most backers of rival Nikki Haley now concede the GOP belongs to him.
Yet, the former South Carolina governor insists she can still turn things around. She'll go head-to-head with Trump on her home turf next month in what will be, for her, likely a make-or-break contest. A loss in South Carolina, where Trump is popular, could prove fatal to her campaign.
The worst-kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump. They know Trump is the only Republican in the country who Joe Biden can defeat.
Well, we've got a live update from New Hampshire. Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor joins us from Nashua. Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, Jillian, good to be with you. It might be snowy and cold here in New Hampshire, but this New Hampshire primary was still a lot different from last week's Iowa caucuses. Yesterday, voters turned out in record numbers for the GOP race, and while it was a clear win for Trump, that turnout did help Nikki Haley finish stronger in this race than the polls predicted. Now, just shortly after the polls were closed, the race was called for former President Trump, but Haley says she is not backing down. Trump has implied it's time for her to drop out of this race and for the party to unite around him, but Haley insists she will forge on to South Carolina for their primary in 1 month. Here's what Trump had to say about that and what he said about his win earlier tonight.
If you remember in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. And just a little note to Nikki, she's not going to win.
In her remarks, Haley conceded her race and congratulated Trump on his win, but she promised to stay in the race. The former UN ambassador is indicating her goal is to get to Super Tuesday, where there are a number of competitive races. Here's a quote from the stage tonight for Nikki Haley. She said, "I'm a fighter and I'm scrappy, and now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump, and today we got close to half of the vote." Next up is South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state. But early polls there still show her trailing Trump by double digits. Trump's New Hampshire victory comes on the heels of his win at the Iowa caucuses, cementing his status as the 2024 Republican frontrunner 6 months out from the GOP convention. No Republican candidate has ever won the first two states and then not ultimately secured the presidential nomination. Trump has won 3 Republican primaries in New Hampshire, but he's yet to win a general election here. He lost to Hillary Clinton in 2016 and to President Biden in 2020. And also, during his remarks tonight, after taking aims at Nikki Haley, he also referenced President Biden. He says the man can't put 2 sentences together. He can't find the stairs off the stage. So Trump is getting ready, we can see, for a potential rematch with Joe Biden. And on the Democrat side here in New Hampshire today, Joe Biden did secure the win, even though his name was not on the ballot. And we know that is because the DNC has made South Carolina its official primary, first official primary. Jillian.
All right, Rebecca, thanks for staying up late with us in New Hampshire. Appreciate it.
Now, Jillian, I know you like a good poll, and a recent poll shows former Governor Nikki Haley can beat President Biden. But former President Trump just won the New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucuses in a blowout last week. It confirms his dominance with conservatives, and we know he has a very strong base. South Carolina, her home state, is critical, but her message now is she will continue to fight.
The next state is Nevada, where I have 100%, because they all pulled out when they looked at the polling. So I have 100%, a lot of delegates, big state. And then I go to South Carolina, and I'm beating her by 60 points. So I just don't know. I mean, that's up to her. I would never ask anybody to pull out.
10 seconds.
Now let's bring in our panelist, Matt Gorman, Vice President of Targeted Victory. He's also the former senior advisor to Senator Tim Scott. And Jose Aristimuño, former DNC Deputy Press Secretary. Gentlemen, welcome.
Top of the morning.
Thank you.
Matt, as you guys both know, money is the lifeblood of these campaigns. Will Nikki Haley's donors give her the campaign cash to keep rolling for a while?
It seems so. I mean, look, she's the last person standing between Trump and being the presumptive nominee. So I assume there'll be some forces and some folks that might not want Trump, might want to have a last stand stopping Trump in South Carolina to pour some resources into her race. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. And again, if she's only focused on one state as kind of her Waterloo, so to speak, it does make it easier in terms of resources. So I think, yes, short answer, there's enough for at least one state, and then you take it from there, depending on how you do in South Carolina.
So, Jose, one of Nikki Haley's core messages this week has been that voters don't want a coronation. She says that is undemocratic. When she talks about that, she's talking about Trump. And the polling that Mike mentioned a moment ago that shows she could very well beat beat President Biden going head-to-head in a general election. This interestingly puts her right in line, in terms of messaging anyway, with Rep. Dean Phillips, who is making the exact same argument about President Biden.
Look, and I'll say this as a Democrat, I think Nikki Haley would be a bigger threat to Joe Biden than Donald Trump ever was. Donald Trump already, he's a defeated candidate. We already beat him once, and we can beat him again. Now, the challenge for Nikki Haley is, can she make it to the general election? As we know, during the primaries and the caucuses, the most sort of, Republican activists, those more to the right extremists are the ones that vote and participate in this sort of contest. So it's going to be very tough for her to break through. Can she break through in South Carolina? It's her home state. She's already lost 2 contests. So I don't know if there's room for her to make it all the way to the general election. But one thing we know about politics, there's always surprises. She's got the money to at least to stay until South Carolina, so time will tell.
Matt, I was struck by how some South Carolina Republicans were very quick to endorse the former president. Tim Scott's only a senator because of Nikki Haley. Nancy Mace, didn't former President Trump run a primary challenge against her? What do you make of all that?
Look, I think endorsements and money follows who's having momentum, who's having success. I don't have inside info on, say, Senator Scott's endorsement per se, but I think you need to show strength and you need to show momentum if you're going to get those endorsements, going to get that money. If you're up, say, by 20 points in New Hampshire, or if you're up in Iowa, in the first couple states, you are going to get a lot of the endorsements. I think in a lot of respects, the folks that are hanging back right now and waiting, they might want to see somebody like a Nikki Haley emerge. They might want to see another person emerge as a nominee, but there's no incentive until Nikki starts winning some of these contests. Look, at the end of the day, it's like the wrestler Ric Flair used to say, right? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. So at some point, to get some of these endorsements, to get some of this money flowing, Nikki will have to beat Trump somewhere. New Hampshire was supposed to be a really golden opportunity. Let's see if she can do it in South Carolina.
So on the Democratic side, Jose, the Biden campaign virtually or really did ignore New Hampshire. This write-in campaign propelled him to victory last night. But Dean Phillips came in with more than 20%. Bill Hemmer said on our air earlier tonight, not a lot of folks had that on their bingo card.
Look, it's concerning for the Biden campaign for him to even get close to the president. I get that. But at the end of the day, we have to understand, and it's unfortunate. There was obviously infighting between New Hampshire and the DNC. And I get it. It's a symbolic, New Hampshire to be the first primary state. And obviously they're not happy that now the DNC decided that South Carolina, in their take, it's going to be the first state to do that. So is it concerning? Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the president won, even though it was a write-in campaign. It goes to show you that the Biden campaign was still active and the Democrats in the state were still active to make sure that the president came out on top. He did win. This is still very, very early. Let's see how this whole thing plays out. But I do agree with Mike. Part of this whole thing, it's money. Biden's got the money. We learned that in Q4 he has over $100 million in the coffers, or he'll do just fine. Can Nikki, match or at least be able to compete with Donald Trump as a much more well-known candidate in comparison to herself?
Matt Gorman and Jose Aristimuño bringing it tonight. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you guys for staying up.
Thank you.
Presidential hopefuls Donald Trump and Nikki Haley have been trading barbs, some very insulting, others kind of funny. It's nothing unusual in the heat of a political debate, but could it go too far?
I mean, did you ever think that she actually appointed you, Tim? And think of it, appointed, and you're the senator of his state, and she endorsed me. You must really hate her. No, it's a shame. It's a shame. Uh-oh.
I just love you.
No, that's good.
Welcome back. Mudslinging, always been a staple of American politics, but Donald Trump, Nikki Haley are getting in their fair share. Are the jabs working? Joining us now to get into it is Sarah Salop, former aide to Vivek Ramaswamy, former presidential candidate. Sarah, thanks for staying up late with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take a listen to this sound from earlier. This is a supporter of Nikki Haley talking about former President Trump.
Nikki's going to unify us. Nikki is going to unify us. Donald Trump is a bridge burner. She's a bridge builder. That's a big thing, and that's what you need to focus on. This is about unifying America, and that's the big point, and that's the big difference. Biden and Trump are two sides of the same coin. Divisive, grievances, investigations. This is not good for America, period.
So she's honed in on this message in the last week, which has been sort of, well, unfortunately, Trump, chaos go hand in hand. She says something like chaos follows him wherever he goes. So trying to walk a fine line of criticizing him but not enough to turn off his supporters.
So one of the big things that you're seeing with Nikki versus Trump right now is that obviously they're saying, oh, unifying the party, but Nikki's the one who's starting to throw back the jabs that she used to call Trump out for. So there's no such thing as unification at this point in the race. It's either the two-party or the two-person race just drops down and everybody rallies the troops, or you just keep hitting low blows until it gets even worse and there's a giant wedge in the party.
Race to the bottom.
With two candidates about 80 years of age or so, there's questions about mental fitness. Nikki Haley talked about it. I'll get you to respond.
Again,
I think he's mentally fit. The problem is, do you want two 80-year-olds running for president? I mean, seriously, in the military, you have to retire at 65. You know, you don't have surgeons doing surgery at 80. More than that, 70% of Americans have said they don't want a Trump-Biden rematch.
That may be an effective argument with younger voters. What about that?
So I think Nikki Haley's using this as her Hail Mary. She's the youngest in the race now. We don't have a Vivek or Ron DeSantis, so it's like, oh, this is my last chance. I can call them out for being older, and I'm the establishment candidate. I have the Bush policies. That's the only thing that's different with them. She can't get the same base, so why doesn't she play on the age? This is just a complete left field tactic from Nikki Haley, and I think, honestly, it's a low blow. We've been talking about cognitive ability the entire year with Fetterman, Feinstein, Joe Biden, and now for Nikki to go after Trump in a last-minute attempt, that's just a little too left field for me.
You know, one of Trump's sort of strengths has always been white voters who are college educated. Interestingly, the exit polls coming out of New Hampshire tonight are showing preliminarily that he got about 37% of the college educated votes in the state. An indicator. I mean, it's good news for him, obviously. Is that a sign maybe that he's growing the base?
I think so, because if you were looking into the polls maybe a week or so ago compared to Iowa, New Hampshire was supposed to be the one that was like, oh, the college age or the college educated voters would come out for Nikki because they're the educated ones who know the issues versus the blue collar workers who have the dinner table issues that they talk about every night. So I think that Trump is really working up the base because we've seen him talk about the same issues and deliver since 2016, 2015, since he started. Now Nikki's just throwing the low balls and everybody's just kind of sick of it.
Very interesting. So we will see. Will the donors continue to give Nikki Haley the money she needs?
I don't think they should. I think they need to back out because if it keeps happening, lower fruit, everything like that, why would you keep spending money into Super Tuesday? Why would you keep having all of the ad buys? It's just a waste of money at that point. And especially if you could back someone like Trump or even like an aligned pack, why would you want to go down with the ship that is literally just calling everybody old and angry?
All right, well, Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks
Thanks
so
for
much.
sharing your analysis with us. Enlightening as always.
Oh, thank you.
Well, with a win in New Hampshire for former President Trump, the Biden-Harris campaign now is setting its sights on a rematch. They say, quote, tonight's results confirm Donald Trump has all but locked up the GOP nomination. The election-denying anti-freedom MAGA movement has now completed its takeover of the Republican Party. According to a poll conducted last month by the AP Nork Center for Public Affairs, 56% of U.S. adults would be dissatisfied with Biden as the Democratic nominee. Similarly, 58% say they would be dissatisfied with Trump as the GOP's choice. So let's welcome back our panel now. Fox News political analyst John O'Caldwell, Fox News contributor and progressive radio host Leslie Marshall, and Lauren Wright, associate research scholar and lecturer in politics and public affairs at Princeton. Welcome back to all of you. Gianna, let's pick up with you where we just left off with Sarah, which is talking about the candidates' age and impact on mental, what I think we've been calling it mental fitness, something like that. Is that something that New Hampshire voters were thinking about today when they went to the polls? It certainly doesn't seem like it.
No, it doesn't. And I think when people think about Donald Trump, they see him with vigor. He's someone who travels the country, oftentimes rallying crowds, and at times staying on message. And I got to tell you, when we think about Donald Trump, and he's an extraordinarily unique, once-in-a-lifetime candidate, 91 indictments, over 90 indictments, 2 impeachments, a number of other considerations that people would have for him or against him, if you will. And he's still the one that most Republicans won, and he's actually changing the course of the numbers, as we've seen for the last several months, if you will, in terms of actually beating Joe Biden in the polling. this is a unique set of circumstances, and I don't think we can use any traditional models for what could be in this particular race. But I know Republicans do want him. They see him as a fighter, and they see him as someone that's fighting for them. So we got a long road ahead of us to the general election, and I think that's where the pivot is for the Joe Biden campaign and Donald Trump. It's the general election, no longer the primary.
Lauren, I've been doing this since Bush 2000, and tonight we had the president's team basically say the primary election's over, it's going to be Trump versus Biden, and then you had the former president saying essentially it's over. Isn't this historically super early?
It is, but something we've been dancing around, and Jillian made a great point earlier about Nikki Haley's chaos message, and jumping off of what Giano just said, the key to Trump is he has the incumbency advantage in this case. He's actually the known entity to Republican voters, despite the fact that Nikki Haley is seen as more of an establishment character. He's less of a gamble in the eyes of conservatives because they've seen him in action. They have not seen Nikki Haley in the same position, regardless of her policy preferences. So she has two huge problems here if she wants to continue on. One is, again, she's running against essentially an incumbent, and people also like the drama. They like the chaos. They like that part of the Trump campaign. It's interesting to them. So when her message is, you get me, different style, same policies, a lot of voters say, why would I want that if you have the same policies?
So, Leslie, Lauren just laid out that Trump has all the advantages of the incumbents, and that helps him with Republicans. But the flip side is also true. His history, his track record really hurts him with Democrats. In a general, obviously.
Well, the whole thing is about the general, okay? You can get the nomination, but you got to win the general to get the presidency. And I'm going to put Pollyanna aside now. Here's the situation. Donald Trump was a president. He is running like an incumbent, yet he has 10 percentage points between his number two, Nikki Haley. That is not a victory lap. Yes, New Hampshire is. Yes, Iowa is. That number is not a victory lap. Joe Biden, can we give him props, doesn't show up, isn't even on the ballot, and a write-in gets nearly 70%, nearly two-thirds, and people are saying there's no enthusiasm, and he's weak, and the numbers are low. Democrats showed, at least in New Hampshire, that they are still behind the president.
All right, panel, stick with us. More in the 2024 primary races when we come back.
Stay with us. After winning big in Iowa's caucuses and now in New Hampshire's primary, it's apparent the former president's momentum is inching him closer to another Republican presidential nomination and a rematch in the fall against President Biden.
Great evening, and I want to thank everybody in the audience, and I want to thank the people that are standing behind me. When you win Iowa and you win New Hampshire, they've never had a loss. There's never been. So we're not going to be the first, I can tell you.
Good evening, good morning, hello. I'm Mike Emanuel.
Whatever it is for you, we hope you're enjoying it, and it's a good one.
Glad to be here with you.
Good to be with you, too. Thanks for staying up later, waking up early with us. I'm Jillian Turner in Washington. We got another hour of special coverage of the first in the nation presidential primary. It was billed as a two-person contest that could have turned things around for Nikki Haley. The South Carolina former governor ended the night almost 12 points behind Trump in the Granite State. So with Iowa and New Hampshire wins, Trump is now proving he can unite the GOP's factions while battling a litany of criminal indictments.
The next Trump-Haley bout is set in Haley's backyard for late February. She can only hope her determination will carry her into the March 5th Super Tuesday contest. But a home state loss could potentially end her 2024 quest to be America's first woman president.
South Carolina voters don't want a coronation. They want an election. And we're going to give them one. because we are just getting started.
For more on former President Trump's victory, we now go to Fox News correspondent Alexis McAdams, who is standing by in New Hampshire.
We're on the ground with the Trump campaign, and there was a lot of excitement in that room at the watch party. And although it wasn't by a massive margin like Trump wanted, a win is a win, right? And he's been hammering Nikki Haley, and she's fighting back. Watch.
You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now. Three. We win it every time. We win the primary, we win the generals, we've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. And the next one is my sweet state of South Carolina. I'm a fighter. And I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump.
So Nikki Haley held more events than Donald Trump on the ground in the Granite State. For her, it was all about retail politics and trying to connect one-on-one with voters. They believe they have a lot of momentum to keep going and a lot of donations that continue to flow in. But how confident is Trump? Well, he's held those large rallies on the ground here, and he's already talking about vice presidential picks. Some names floated so far: Vivek Ramaswamy and Senator Tim Scott. I checked in with both. Watch.
So is it going to be Vice President Tim Scott?
It's going to be Tim Scott working on behalf of the American people. That means getting Donald Trump to be the next president. Don't think about myself. Don't think about the individuals. Let's think about America first.
And when we've talked to voters on the ground over the past week or so, they tell me their top issue is immigration. And when you look at that Fox News voter analysis, it did become the top issue that really pushed voters out to the polls. Back to you.
Alexis McAdams, thanks very much.
Well, President Biden is projected to win the Democratic primary in New Hampshire by a long shot. His supporters had to write his name in. He was not on the state ballot because of the ongoing dispute between his campaign and the DNC over the primary's calendar. The Biden team's been arguing for a year the state is not diverse enough to vote first. His victory overnight is largely symbolic, as there are no delegates up for grabs in New Hampshire. Time to welcome back our panel: Fox News political analyst John O. Caldwell, Fox News contributor and progressive radio host Leslie Marshall, and Lauren Wright, associate research scholar and lecturer in politics at Princeton. So, John O., let's start with you. This was supposed to be an uphill battle for Trump in the Granite State. Didn't really turn out that way.
All up, no hill or battle is essentially what we see. And as we look ahead to South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state, where we know we have a Tim Scott endorsement, we have a governor. The governor of South Carolina has endorsed Donald Trump, 7 members of Congress, 5 statewide office holders, giving about 13 endorsements to Donald Trump, 1 for Nikki Haley for her home state, which she's claiming she's going to win all. It's looking very problematic for Nikki Haley, and if she makes it to the South Carolina primary, if she goes that long, because we know donors are going to be pulling out, I think it's going to be her last and final stand. I think tonight really is her last and final stand, but if she were to choose to do it, definitely that would be her last and final stand.
Lauren, let me play devil's advocate here, okay? So nearly 45% of the Republican voters tonight did not vote for Donald Trump. Nearly 50% at the Iowa caucuses did not support him there either. Is that a sign of weakness for somebody who is a former president?
Well, it is, and his chief challenger right now, the person in second place, used to work for him. And we have not seen that since FDR's vice president ran against him in 1940. It is really quite striking. And yes, it does mean there are major divisions in the Republican Party. His vice president also ran against him, but didn't do quite as well as Nikki Haley. So this is unprecedented, historic. Yes, it shows divisions in the party. Yes, they need to unify the party to win a national election. And that is important because on every other issue, as you just showed from those polls, Republicans have the advantage, except for Trump is divisive, and the abortion issue benefits Democrats tremendously. On the economy, on immigration, they're in a really great spot.
I want to ask you, Leslie, about something I picked up with Sarah a moment ago. That is the reality that both Dean Phillips and Democrat and Republican Nikki Haley have based a lot of their core messaging lately around advocating for generational change in this election cycle. When you stand back and look at the big picture, do you think that message is penetrating anywhere in the country?
No. I mean, look at the polls that you have, right? And you'll have a poll saying, is Joe Biden too old to run for president? That's the question. People answer it. And a lot of people say yes. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, as we see from the votes tonight in New Hampshire, when it comes down to the issues that matter, nowhere in the top 10 for Democrats or Republicans is age. What we're seeing are Republicans are talking about the economy and immigration, and Democrats are talking about abortion and preserving democracy. And there's some overlap in there as well. And speaking about that number 2 spot, if we're going to throw out some numbers, because this is what would frighten me if I were working on the Trump campaign, if he's going to be the nominee for the general, 43% of Iowa voters that voted for Nikki Haley said they would vote for Biden. In New Hampshire, 70% of Nikki Haley's voters were not Republicans. They were independents or undeclared. And a number of those people are saying they're voting against Donald Trump, not really for Nikki Haley. What is that going to translate to in a general? And one last thing, I don't know why Nikki Haley would call it quits after South Carolina. I mean, the numbers are very clear. Donald Trump has, you know, between a 35 and 40% lead, depending on what poll you read and believe. And if she's going to lose in your home state and not keep going, if you could, financially till Super Tuesday, I don't understand her game plan.
So, Gianna, when we looked at the stage, of the Trump Victory Party, you had Vivek Ramaswamy up there, Senator Tim Scott up there. Potential audition for a running mate? What do you think?
Maybe Tim Scott. I don't know about Vivek, even though I know Trump really likes what he has to say. But here's the thing, though, and we're talking about two individuals, and I'm looking towards the general election with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. These are people who are considered to be divisive. And we've heard Joe Biden speak in racial undertones when he called LL Cool J boy, when he told Charlamagne the God, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And I know the issues of immigration, as Leslie mentioned, you know, there's some overlap on the issues of consideration today. Now, when we think about all of those particular things, and I know that there are some negatives that Donald Trump has that independents don't like and Democrats don't like. I know the reason why we saw Nikki Haley, as Leslie mentioned, the polling in terms of those folks that voted for Nikki Haley, a significant amount of them would not vote for Donald Trump. You got to keep in mind that a lot of those folks that vote, MSNBC and CNN have been telling them, look, you need to go out and vote for Nikki Haley if you don't want to see Donald Trump become the Republican nominee and possibly win the general election. So I think to some degree, these voters are artificial in consideration. They wouldn't vote for Nikki Haley if Donald Trump wasn't there either. So we got to keep those in mind. There's a lot of things that are in the mix in this election season.
All right, panel, we got to leave it there, but we're going to bring you back again. We still have not had enough of you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. As we mentioned, immigration topping the agenda for Republican voters in New Hampshire. 41% said it's the most important issue facing the country right now. Even beating out the economy and jobs is a source of concern. This comes as Senate negotiators hammer out a border deal with the White House, along with aid for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen has more from New York.
Though we have made significant progress, there's still more work to do.
Senators working on a deal to secure the southern border say they're close, but they aren't quite finished.
We're working hard on a bipartisan basis to try to come up with a piece of legislation that will actually help begin to solve this crisis at the border.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he wants a bill on the Senate floor this week. Adding to the holdup, negotiators on both sides also need to come to an agreement on funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. As leaders from both sides work to hammer out a deal, other Democrats and Republicans are blaming each other for the crisis. and some have accused each other of sabotaging the deal.
If the Democrats were serious about the border, they could have done something when Joe Biden was in his first 2 years of office. Chuck Schumer ran the Senate and Pelosi ran the House. They did nothing, not one single immigration bill.
We have the obligation to tune out the hard-right chaos and let the negotiators finish their work. Too much hangs in the balance for our national security, for our border, for our friends around the world.
As negotiations continue, House Republicans plan to move forward with articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas as soon as next week. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thanks.
All right, well, former President Trump has a lot to celebrate this morning after winning the New Hampshire primary, but some legal challenges, a lot of legal challenges, still hanging over the campaign. We're going to get into that coming up next.
Former President Donald Trump is juggling his campaign and legal issues. His defamation trial resumes in a New York City courtroom. The civil case was brought against Trump by writer E. Jean Carroll. A jury has already found that Mr. Trump tarnished her reputation. Another jury must now decide how much, if anything, he should pay Carroll in damages. So how might this his supporters react if he's actually convicted in any of the criminal cases against him? In addition to 4 criminal indictments, Mr. Trump is also fighting a civil lawsuit that threatens the future of his real estate empire. Joining us now to break this down is Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor. Richard, it is great to have you.
Good
Night owl.
Or good night, depending upon what time it is.
So I've talked to some Republicans who say the legal issues have only cemented support with some Republicans because they feel like it's his political opponents trying to take him off the ballot and off the playing field. What about that?
Look, I got to agree with those Republicans, right? And I think where the Trump campaign has done a really good job is they've made this me equals we type of argument frame, which basically says to his voters, this is happening to me, thus this is happening to you, thus you should support me. And I think what that's done for him, both in Iowa and in New Hampshire, is really coalesced his base of support to say, listen, we're with him no matter what. Herein lies a problem for the president. If you look at the Ohio results, if you look at the New Hampshire results, what you'll find is 40% of Republicans are like, we don't think you're the right guy to be our GOP nominee. And we've decided not to vote for you. And think about it this way. If we are viewing Trump in the frame of as an incumbent, right? He is the incumbent Republican. Look at his results compared to Joe Biden, where Joe Biden's getting 60% of the vote, 70% of the vote, 80% of the vote. In this case, what you saw Trump do is get above 50%. But if he's the incumbent, that's not a good showing. Therein lies his problem moving into this as we move closer to this GOP nomination, which seems likely to be his.
Let's talk about your people now, the Democrats. So this writing campaign in New Hampshire got Biden across the finish line, handed him a victory tonight. But Dean Phillips, I mean, a member of Congress with virtually no name recognition, you know, racked up more than 20% of the votes. Were you surprised?
I will be. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'll say, look, there's pox in everybody's house at this point in time. I think for Donald Trump, his problem is he has to win back over suburban Republicans. He has to win back over independents that lean Republican. For the president, the sitting president of the United States, Joe Biden, if the election were today, his #1 problem would be that he has to win over some coalition voters that were with him in 2020, that were with the Democratic Party in 2022, that have sort of obstructed the red wave, and he's going to have a lot of work to do. Today, he gave us, or yesterday, he gave a speech in Manassas, Virginia, and the speech was interrupted a number of times by folks who says, we don't agree with your particular policy on Israel. One of his challenges. He has challenges with folks who say, we don't feel like you've done everything that you said you were going to do. And he also has challenges with voters who say, hey, listen, you came in and you said you're going to get all this stuff done. The Biden administration has a legislative agenda that either Trump or Obama would have loved to have, and they now have to communicate that to their base of voters, saying, here's what we've done, here's why you haven't felt it, and here's the benefit that you are feeling. As of this year, if you're a senior citizen, you can't pay more than $35 on your insulin. Before that, you were paying some $600, $700 a month for your insulin. So there's some wins that the Biden campaign has accomplished, that the Biden White House has accomplished. Now it's his time to sell that to the American people and hope they buy it.
I was struck after New Hampshire when the Biden campaign came out and said that Trump's the presumptive nominee and we're on to the general election. It's like 2 states have voted, not very diverse states, What about the other 300 and something million people in this country?
You sound like Nikki Haley.
If you say it enough times, you increase the odds it's going to come true.
Well, I mean, Democrats didn't want those states to go first. Democrats wanted to start in South Carolina. So why is everybody saying game over? I'm just curious.
Look, I think there's a couple of things happening here. I think the Democratic Party last year, when they decided what their primary map looked like, they said they want a primary map that looks much more like the Democratic Party than New Hampshire and Iowa. So they decided to go with South Carolina, then Georgia, and then a couple of other states. I think what the Biden campaign wants at this moment is they want to say that Trump is now the nominee, and now we have an opportunity to begin to frame Donald Trump, remind you of January 6th, go to those folks who voted for Nikki Haley, the independents who said we don't think that if he's convicted of a crime, that he could be the president, and woo those votes over by reminding them of who Trump was in the latter years of his administration. Will that work? We're going to have to wait to see, but as of right now, Trump is ahead in many of these battleground state polls, which is why the Biden team is very anxious to say we have a nominee, we think it's Donald Trump, and now we're going to begin to frame him in the message that we think will work best for our campaign.
Well, and the re-election campaign, the Biden re-election campaign is also very eager to anoint Trump the nominee because polling shows that if he goes head-to-head with Nikki Haley in a general election, she may very well take the cake.
Listen, that was Nikki Haley's most viable argument. Sadly, what you see in the Haley campaign, which I do think folks, if you're not starting to write her obituary, will probably start tomorrow morning when they wake up, is there isn't a path for her to get out of the GOP nomination. So while she might beat Joe Biden and many of these statistical head-to-heads or these polls that we've seen, the number one problem she has is she cannot win the GOP nomination. And the chance for her to do that was tonight in New Hampshire, not because it was delegate rich. There's only 22 delegates up for state up here, but it's because this was the best chance she had to change the formula of the race. When you get down to South Carolina, when you get into some of the bigger states that are part of Super Tuesday, it's all going to be about the GOP machine. And let's be very clear, over the past, since 2016 to now, Donald Trump and the Trump campaign has done everything in their power to make the GOP machine be in his likeness. And you're seeing the results of that both in Iowa and in New Hampshire.
Are you struck by how quickly Tim Scott and Nancy Mace jumped on the Trump train when they're from South Carolina? Tim Scott's only a senator because of Nikki Haley.
That was a very interesting one for me, but I do think that Tim Scott is trying to be probably a VP contender, so he's trying to get in that race. And I also think for a lot of these members of Congress who sort of sat on the sidelines, you'll see a lot of their endorsements come through for the president by tomorrow, the day after that, because they also don't want to face a world in which, in their reelection, they might be primaried by somebody who Trump will endorse. Because one thing we know about this president, and we've talked about this all night, is that he's a big believer in loyalty, and when he doesn't get it, he will do everything in his power to make sure that you don't get what you need or the political wins that you need.
I think we'll be waiting a long time for Mitch McConnell's endorsement.
I mean, why everybody wants to be the vice president? I mean, that should be a separate panel. Maybe somebody can explain to me, like, why on God's green earth
That's for the 4 o'clock hour. And on the Mitch McConnell question, I do not think you'll see a Mitch McConnell endorsement for quite some time, but nobody's expecting it. I don't think Trump is asking for Mitch McConnell endorsement.
No.
Yeah.
Richard Fowler,
it's good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Richard. Go get some sleep. All right, well, the South Carolina contest looming large on the horizon, especially now for Nikki Haley. That primary is about a month away. Former President Trump has a nearly 30-point lead, according to weekend polling. We're going to get into that next.
Another commanding performance by Donald Trump and his campaign. The former president scores a decisive victory in New Hampshire's primary, demonstrating once again his solid grip on the Republican Party. Mr. Trump's wide support among New Hampshire's GOP voters yesterday and in Iowa last week heightens the chances of a Trump-Biden rematch later this year. Even most backers of rival Nikki Haley now concede the GOP seems to belong to him.
Yet the former South Carolina governor says she's still got a path to clinch the nomination and is looking forward to heading home for her next stop. A loss there, though, could spell the end of her campaign.
We are going to win this. We have no choice. If we don't win, I think our country is finished. I do. I believe our country is finished. We have an opportunity to do something So amazing. And the good news and the reason we have such support, the best numbers I've ever had, the reason we have support is because they are so bad at what they're doing and so evil, and they're destroying our country.
This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go.
She vows to battle on, but Nikki Haley faces a far more formidable test of her popularity in March, assuming her campaign survives that long. Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor joins us live from Nashua. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Mike. Good to be with you. It might be snowy and cold here, too, but this New Hampshire primary was a lot different than last week's Iowa caucuses. Voters turned out in record numbers for the GOP race. And while it was still a clear win for Trump, that turnout did help his last standing rival, Nikki Haley, finish stronger in this race than the polls predicted. Now, soon after the polls closed, the race was called for former President Trump. But Haley says she's not backing down. Trump has implied it's time for her to drop out of this race and for the party to unite around him. But Haley insists she will forge on to South Carolina for their primary in 1 month. Here's what Trump had to say about that in his win earlier tonight.
If you remember, in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting because I said, wow, what a great victory. And just a little note to Nikki, she's not going to win.
In her remarks, Haley congratulated Trump on his win, but promised to stay in the race. The former UN ambassador is indicating her goal is to get to Super Tuesday, where there are a number of competitive races.
I congratulate Donald Trump on his victory tonight. He earned it. And I want to acknowledge that. This race is far from over. There are dozens of states left to go. Well, I'm a fighter, and I'm scrappy. And now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump.
Next up is South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state. But early polls there still show her trailing Trump by double digits. Trump's New Hampshire victory comes on the heels of his win at the Iowa caucuses, cementing his status as the 2024 Republican frontrunner 6 months out from the GOP convention. No Republican candidate has ever won the first 2 states and then not ultimately secured the presidential nomination. Trump has won 3 Republican primaries in New Hampshire, but he's yet to win a general election here. He lost to Hillary Clinton in 2016 and to President Biden in 2020.
We have beaten Biden. You could almost say, who can't? Who the hell can't? The man can't put 2 sentences together. He can't find the stairs off a stage.
And it sounds like Trump is ready to take on President Biden in the general election. And on the Democratic side today, President Joe Biden did secure the win, even though his name wasn't on the ballot. And that's because the DNC made South Carolina its first official primary. Mike.
Rebecca, I was struck by the change in the former president's tone. Last week, he sounded very happy, was talking about Nikki and Ron. Tonight, he sounded irritated that she's still in the race. What about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a change in tone here from his victory speech after the Iowa caucuses to his victory speech tonight. You know, leading into the victory speech tonight, he said he wasn't going to ask anybody to drop out, but yet he indicated that's what he wants the former South Carolina governor to do.
Rebecca Castor live in snowy Nashua, New Hampshire. Rebecca, thanks very much.
I guess there's a difference between wishing for something and asking for it. You know?
Right.
Well, South Carolina's primary is about a month away now. A lot of politicos have already anointed Donald Trump the victor there, but Nikki Haley has the home field advantage.
This is a one-on-one campaign now, so the actual truth is that he gets 50%. We should all consider the race over. More importantly, when we turn our sights to South Carolina, I expect that he'll be over 60% in the home state of the governor who's running against him. So this is really good news for the president.
Right, joining us now is Matt Gorman, Vice President of Targeted Victory and former senior advisor to South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Also Jose Aristimuño, former DNC Deputy Press Secretary. That was a mouthful at 3:35 a.m.
You're doing a heck of a job. Keep going.
I'm just trying to be is half as good as you, Mike.
Come on.
But gents, thanks for joining us again. Thanks for staying up late.
Thank you.
Matt, let's start with you. Mike's right to point out that, last Monday night in Iowa, everybody was talking about how all the analysts were saying how Trump sounded so presidential and so upbeat and energetic and stayed away from the jabs. He really, though, last night seemed very irked despite his significant victory.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And you also noticed among his supporters on Monday night, it was much more of a consolidation. Hey, let's all get together behind as one party to defeat Joe Biden. We all got to come together. You're right. Now it's a little bit more pressure. We've had the carrot, so to speak, and now we might be getting a little bit of the stick. I would expect that to continue a little bit. But yes, I noticed that too. And I think you're going to be hearing more of that in the days and weeks to come.
Jose, is there a sense of relief on the Democratic side that the president won a write-in candidate? Because there would have been embarrassing headlines if he had lost. And obviously, the Democrats wanted to go to South Carolina first. And so it was kind of an awkward situation all the way around when New Hampshire takes that first primary in the country status very seriously.
Look, I think first and foremost we have to recognize that the president won, even though it was a write-in campaign, and it was a symbolic win. Obviously, on the DNC side, the rules changed, and now South Carolina will be its first official primary state. But look, I think the president did well. I think he's going to continue to do well. On the other side, we see Trump, and I agree with Matt and you guys that clearly, the tone of the former president has changed. I think Trump wants this whole thing to be over, and he's ready to battle it out with President Joe Biden. We welcome that. We're ready. We think the same thing. Let's get this party started, as they say. Joe Biden beat President Trump once, and I know he can do it again.
Let's talk about, Matt, Nikki Haley for a moment now. Take a listen to her talking about how she not only hopes to be victorious in South Carolina, but is actually planning on it.
Going to South Carolina, we have put in the ad buy. We're there. This has always been a marathon. It's never been a sprint. We want to be strong in Iowa. We want to be stronger than that in New Hampshire. We're going to be even stronger than that in South Carolina. We're running the tape.
How much of that do you think is, or put it this way, to her supporters, her financial backers, do you think they're listening to this and thinking it's bluster, or do you think they're buying it?
Days like today is certainly the post-election speech you heard, but also throughout the day today. It's less about previewing what you're going to see in that night's results in New Hampshire, but setting a narrative going forward. So what she needs to be able to do, she started it yesterday, and she has to continue it, set a narrative for donors, supporters, the press, that she is a credible case moving forward, that she has a realistic path moving forward. You talked about the margins, right? Very, very soon we're going to get some of the first polls out of South Carolina. And I assume they're going to be a pretty healthy Trump margin. She needs to be able to really show concretely how she can make up that gap. Look, South Carolina is the third fastest growing state in the country in the last couple of years. So you have lots of new voters there, lots of voters who didn't vote for Nikki Haley the last time she was in the ballot in 2014. And quite a few didn't vote for Trump the last time he was in the ballot in that state, too. So there's some new voters you can make your case to, but she has to set a narrative going forward. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot more pressure among donors, the press, and even on her own supporters to possibly say enough's enough.
Jose, as a Democrat, would it be better for your party if Republicans were slugging it out with each other a little longer before potentially there's a clear Republican nominee?
Look, it's a great question, Mike. Look, I don't think it really matters on our side. We're ready to battle that. And look, whether the primary continues all the way to Super Tuesday and beyond, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they're out there. They're campaigning already, regardless. So whichever the scenario is, we're ready to do this. I think Nikki Haley, she's got her job cut out for herself in South Carolina. She did better, I will admit. I think she did better than a lot of people thought she was going to do in New Hampshire, but I don't think she'll go past her home state, unfortunately.
Jose Aristimuño, Matt Gorman, gentlemen, thanks for bringing it tonight.
Appreciate
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Former President Trump and Nikki Haley don't see eye to eye on domestic issues, and there's no difference when it comes to global politics. Fox News correspondent Benjamin Hall brings us the details on what sets them apart. He's from London.
Well, the focus may very well be on domestic issues at the moment, but the two candidates also have far different foreign policies as well. President Trump has always been an American-first president, and he has accused Nikki Haley of being more global. One difference is Ukraine. President Trump has said that defending Ukraine is not a national security priority for America, and he says he would get a peace deal in just one day and that the unlimited money there must stop. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, believes that everything must be given to Ukraine to try and push back Russia, and not doing so would allow Russia to run rampant through Europe. Nikki Haley has also taken off the gloves now and accused Trump of also cozying up to dictators. Just yesterday, she released a campaign ad with the mother of Otto Warmbier. He was the student who was arrested and killed by North Korea, who said Haley was there for her during that ordeal. Nikki Haley has also mocked Trump's bromance with Putin. President Trump, however, defends all his meetings with these leaders, believing that any dialogue can be useful, that you must sit and talk to everyone and try to work on a deal, just in the way he did with Presidents Putin, Kim Jong-un and Xi. Both candidates also agree on countering China. However, Nikki Haley has criticized Trump again for being far too friendly with the country, saying that President Trump is only focused on economic restrictions, while she would be far more active in the region alongside Asian allies. As for Israel, both Haley and Trump have total support for the country and what's happening in Gaza, but President Trump has already warned against getting further involved in the Middle East and is also calling Haley a warmonger. One other key focus is the U.S. relationship with NATO. President Trump has made it very clear that he will reevaluate that relationship. And unless other countries continue to increase their own spending, there are rumours that President Trump could pull out altogether. That would be a geopolitical lightning strike, and other countries are already looking to see how they would respond if that happened. Nikki Haley has a far more traditional view of the relationship and believes in keeping it much as it is. Mike, Gillian?
Benjamin Hall, thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, primary voters in New Hampshire came out in full force. The Secretary of State there says as many as 300,000 plus. But after only 15% of Iowa's registered Republicans showed up to the caucus last week, there's major concern about voter enthusiasm this cycle. We're going to dig into that next.
Long lines as people came out in full force to support their candidates for the New Hampshire primaries. It's a stark contrast to the Iowa caucuses last week, when only 15% of registered Republicans showed up. The New Hampshire turnout settles some GOP fears of low enthusiasm. Joining us now, Maura Gillespie, Blue Stack Strategies founder and principal. She's also former advisor to Speaker John Boehner and former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Maura, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So what are your takeaways from the primary in the great state of New Hampshire?
It was good to see more people turning out than Iowa. Obviously, it's a different kind of setup. People in Iowa have to stick around longer, and whereas if you're going to a polling place, you can just come in, vote, and go. But I do think that Nikki Haley surprised some folks and did better than people may have expected. I also thought that the president's speech last night was, again, I think she's really getting under his skin, and you could tell by lamenting the fact that she had, gotten on stage and he, made mention of it several times about how she acted like she had won. And I think for Nikki Haley, it was a win. She did better than people expected. So definitely an interesting dynamic there.
Maura, do you see a path forward for Nikki Haley through South Carolina and beyond?
It's going to be hard if there's a continued lack of people showing up for primary votes. I mean, historically, our country has not really shown up to vote in the primary, and especially the Republican Party. This lack of enthusiasm that you're seeing is concerning to me, and it does hurt someone like a Nikki Haley, because we know that Donald Trump's base of supporters is super loyal to him, and so they will show up and maybe brave the elements to support him. But across the country and across the political spectrum, people don't tend to participate in the primary elections. And I think it's a disservice to our democracy as a whole, because we're really not giving ourselves every chance to participate.
So you can hardly blame, I was going to say, you can hardly blame folks for not turning out when it's 25 below.
Fair point there.
Right. Different.
So, Maura, as someone who used to work in the building behind us, what about concerns down ballot if it's Trump v. Biden 2.0 and enthusiasm or lack thereof?
It's a real concern for especially the Senate, House members as well, but for those senators who are up for re-election, it's going to be a real concern for them. Again, this lack of participation in our democracy, our electoral process, it hurts them. And, it also hurts them in the fundraising department. Donald Trump said in Iowa, and he's talked about it kind of every stump speech he's given, talking about his legal bills and all the money that he needs from his supporters, not for the campaign, but for his defense, for his legal battles he's up against. And on the contrary, Joe Biden isn't really opposed. I mean, Dean Phillips did put, some numbers up there in New Hampshire, but it's not obviously going to really amount to anything. But he's able to fundraise, put all that money towards his campaign, whereas Donald Trump cannot. He's not going. He's already told his voters that he's not going to do that. He's putting it towards his bills.
Do you think his New Hampshire victory sets him up for a new slate of endorsements on Capitol Hill this week?
Perhaps, but I think for a lot of people, the endorsements don't really amount to much. It doesn't matter about who shows up to vote. So these members can endorse all they want if it makes them feel like they're going to get to stay in their jobs. But again, it really doesn't matter about that. It matters about getting people energized out to vote, getting rural America to come out and vote. That's some of these key demographics that they're not tapping into right now or seeing is where they need to be targeting their efforts, less so on, maybe endorsing, but maybe more so talking to their constituents and reminding them why they should be in this job in the first place.
Maura Gillespie, thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Maura. All right, let's bring back in the panel one last time for final words. We couldn't say goodnight without bringing you guys back in. We're going to go once around this horn quickly because we don't have a lot of time. Leslie, I want to hear anything you want to share with us.
Let me see. I'm still awake. No, just you guys are on 3 hours ahead of me. Bottom line is I'm encouraged by what I saw in New Hampshire about the enthusiasm with Democrats. And even though I think it's going to be a Biden-Trump 2.0, I think it's going to be a very different election. And I think that we're going to see a lot of surprises in the positive from my party and Democratic voters and Joe Biden himself. And I think that approval rating is going to go up as more and more people feel the positive impacts of Bidenomics.
Lauren Wright, what are your takeaways from tonight?
Even if people are writing Nikki Haley's obituary, as you've said multiple times, Mike, I do think it's a little bit premature, especially for 4 years from now. And I think we should acknowledge what she has accomplished this time around. She beat out 5 former and current governors. She made a name for herself on the debate stage. She's introduced herself to a lot of new voters, and maybe they'll stick with her a few years down the road.
All right.
Jono.
Looking ahead to the general election, I know that Joe Biden's most loyal voters, African Americans, have dropped their support from 87% to 63%. I know that he's trailing Hispanics. With the Hispanics, our biggest voting bloc for this next election is going to be Gen Z and millennials. He's losing with those guys as well, and they don't like the Israel-Palestinian war and his stance on it. I know that we've all become a little anxious when it comes to polls since 2016, since they were so wrong, Mike, and you've been asking the question, why should Nikki Haley drop out now? The truth is she's relying on Democrats too much to save her candidacy, and most Republicans are in favor of Donald Trump. So to sum it up, I think we have a big general election to look ahead to, and nothing is going to be traditionally how it plays out, it appears.
Gianno, I love that you were listening to my questions. Thank you.
Yes. Indeed.
We all were, Mike.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for staying up so late with us. We really appreciate it. Learned a lot from talking to you. Hope to do it again.
Hey,
a little earlier in the evening.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, a little earlier. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Well, that wraps it up for us here in Washington, D.C. It's been great having these extra 2 hours with you at home. Tonight, thanks for joining us. I'm Jillian Turner.
Jillian, great working with you.
Good to be with you, Michael.
I'm Mike Emanuel. Fox and Friends will have more analysis on last night's results At the top of the hour, it should be an action-packed morning. Stay with us here on Fox. We'll have it all covered for you. Good day. It's like, do I say goodnight?